Hi, this is Pretty Amazing People. This is Nicole, and my guest today is a Jewish American orthopedic surgeon who has been doing humanitarian work for decades and natural disasters. He was in Haiti. He was also at Ground Zero, 9/11. He has also been to Gaza. So we will be talking about that. I've been hearing him speak on interviews like CBS Morning, interviewed on TRT World. I'm going to include those links because those interviews were a must listen. I'm fortunate enough to have had a wonderful, lengthy conversation with him, covering several of topics that are important and things that I really feel everyone needs to hear. I learned a lot. I even had no idea of his initial feelings about Palestinians before he went to Gaza, but he's definitely an incredible doctor and humanitarian. This is Dr. Mark Perlmutter. So thank you for being here. I'm
Sure.
so excited
My
for the
pleasure.
talk. I've been watching your interviews and you have said everything that I really want people to hear. And so looking forward to this conversation. Let's start with you've done a lot of humanitarian work and you've been at natural disasters and 9/11. So share a little bit about that and then
I
how did you get
I
to
have a
Gaza?
string of bad decisions in my life.
You too? Oh, that's okay. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so I just always had this feeling that whenever there's a disaster, that there's never an appropriate response, and that you can't depend on our government for anything. And that's the truth. You can't. Um, so on 9/11, I closed my practice that morning, and I had unboxed in my car a little tiny newfangled device that could actually plug into a car lighter and act as a portable printer. Right? Figured, boy, that's the cat's pajamas. So I try to be a techie, so I figured I'll buy it, even though I don't think I'll ever need it. And it was still in my car, still not unpackaged. Just got it the day before, um, and as I walk into my office, on the TV that's in the waiting room that I have to walk through, there's the first tower burning. And figured, well, I recognize that site. And so I turned around. I told my scheduler to schedule me off for the day, and then told me she hears from me. Um, in my office across the hall actually was another doctor, a urologist, named Aldo Sirachi, super nice guy. He asked me, "Where are you going in a hurry?" And I said, "The World Trade Centers were just bombed. I didn't know it was a plane at that point. I'm going to New York." He goes, "You need company?" I go, "Yeah." So Aldo and I just took off and we went to New York. And so I said, "Hey, listen, open that box." uh, and so now download the letterhead for a hospital in New York close to the World Trade Center. And I couldn't name a hospital if I had to, right? So he goes, "There's this place called St. Vincent's Medical Center." I said, "Okay, create a letterhead on their letterhead that I'm the head of orthopedic trauma there, and get me into New York, get us into New York." And so I created these letterheads, and then the letterheads were pixelated. It was a horrible printer, but they didn't care. We essentially lied our way all the way to the Chelsea Center. In fact, we got an escort through the Lincoln Tunnel by ourselves at over 100 miles an hour by the Clifton, New Jersey Police Department. Was in charge of the Meadowlands, the staging ground to get in New York, and from that point on, it was an easy trip through an absolutely empty New York. It was a ghost town, the northern part and of the city, and then and that worked. And then that made me realize, when we eventually got to the Stuyvesant High School, it cemented into my opinion that, yeah, our government sucks in terms of getting mobilizing medical relief for anything. And that was supported at Katrina, where I saw lines of trucks that had this newly formed corporation for rapid responses in healthcare still on the tarmac of the Shreveport airport, where I was laying out cadavers and people that Army medics who thought were cadavers, who were still living people in diabetic coma, and sending them to the morgue to die, thinking that they were dead. Now, keep in mind, this is, I think, right after Desert Storm. An Army medic does not even have the advanced training of an EMT in the United States. They have functionally no training. They're high school graduates that have very superficial training. I don't even know if they even know how to do CPR. They certainly don't know how to identify somebody in diabetic coma who's still alive. Um, and they were literally sending living people to the morgue. And none of these supplies from the U.S. government even were unloaded or offloaded to help us during Katrina. And the U.S. agency formed to help with disaster relief. Feckless, absolutely feckless, worthless. Um, and so that proved to me that, again, it just reaffirmed that when I get up and go, that I'm going to be needed. Um, and that's been proven true uh, at Hurricane Andrew, Hurricane Katrina, the Haitian earthquake, and every natural disaster. And it's also affirmed every time you go to a place where that needs you for a surgical mission that you're very much needed. There's just yeah, no matter what your skill set is, if you're a healthcare provider or a carpenter, you're absolutely needed. Um, the skill set of locals has to be respected, but your additional set of hands and knowledge uh, is very valuable, and their knowledge is valuable. I've never come away from a mission trip, for example, not smarter than when I went. I learned from the people I think I'm going to teach immensely. So it's always a two-way street. And realistically, they're empowered intellectually. They're just not empowered materially or with the same opportunities to train that I did. Uh, so we're really working with super smart people that just don't have the same blessings that I've had in my life in terms of training and exposure. So and so it's a mutually rewarding experience for everybody who does this type of mission work. Gaza was a different story. Um, if I combine all of the horrible things I've seen in my life, and man, I have to tell you, I've seen some pain in my life. Absolutely, absolutely horrible things. If I combined everything I saw at Ground Zero, the Haitian earthquakes, I was there 4 times. Um, if I combine every mission trip to Africa or to Central or South America, 40 some trips. Um, if I combine all of that, it wasn't even remotely close to the carnage that we saw in Gaza in just the first couple of days to a week. Gaza was just on a completely different level. Then there's definitive reasons for it too. It's what we saw. It's
When were you there again?
March and April of last year. I'm talking to you from my home now because my trip I was hoping to be there now as we speak, but Kogat would not approve us going. So we're trying to get in uh, again for the end of February.
I've heard you talk about when you went, it sounded like you said, first, before we get into what you've seen there, um, you said your beliefs and your values, even like your faith and you believed all the propaganda. Even me, I've been doing a lot of deep dive learning in the past year, from day one. A lot of people, I think, and that's why we're here, is like things don't make sense. I knew October 7th because of what I know and from what I've been there, Palestinian side. I knew what was happening. I knew right away. And Palestinians, we knew. But even somebody had to tell me, explain to me, that it wasn't what we were being fed in the media.
Oh my
And
gosh! Well, I was way in more in the dark than you. You're of Palestinian heritage. I have Jewish heritage. Most of my living relatives are practicing Jews. My twin sister is a conservative Jew. On the other hand, my older brother my only living brother is a deacon in his Catholic church, and I'm somewhere in the middle. Uh, my mother was Italian Catholic. My father was Hungarian Jew, and I teasingly tell everybody I'm a Jewapi, trying to you know jokingly denigrate my heritage. But from a religious point of view, I'm more agnostic now than I was before, um, largely because I'm offended about how huge the second largest population of Jews in the world, which are Israelis, can be a collection of intelligentsia, can be so consuming of the Kool-Aid, of the propaganda that was fed to them since childhood, um, about how horrible you, as a Palestinian, a terrorist is, in other words, can be. I've spoken to Israelis since then and said, "Well, what's your opinion about the Nakba?" And their understanding of even that is superficial because they're not told the truth. I was never told the truth. I didn't hear the word Nakba until Dr. Sigwa, who I affectionately call my professor, um, taught me about it. I I was a baby bird being fed the APAC worm my whole life, um, not just in my religious readings, but also in my political readings, my legacy media meetings, my Google searches. I had no concept how Meta and Apple filtered the news that I was reading. No concept at all. I thought that Apple would be straightforward. I thought that their news program, which I canceled my Times and Post subscriptions for because they summarized it okay. Um, I, 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 I further chewed on that Zionistic worm, not realizing how that long arm of Zionism reaches into my social media, which I thought was the bastion of honesty, given that aside from Sarah Cagle at CBS, not her management, but just Sarah Cagle at CBS, how the legacy media, including people I respected like Jake Tapper, have done a face plant on ethical journalism. Um, Indeed, legacy media is the living example of journalistic malpractice. Uh, I think Walter Cronkite is rolling over in his grave when he watches, uh, you other than Sarah, CBS or NBC or ABC or CNN.
And
Uh,
you can't help but notice that these people, I know exactly where they get their information from because of the words out of their mouth, right? You
yeah,
talk to
right.
somebody and it's like, and they live in it. It's like I see they have the TVs on all around them, on the radio, and
Oh,
it
sure.
literally,
Their feeds are the same things that are steered to them. Uh, they are they are nothing but filters of the bullshit that they receive, and it's filtered bullshit. It's filtered dishonesty, um, and the people, the power brokers of the news media, um, are receiving the money or generating the money from APAC and other organizations. They control that the same way they control the billions of dollars that the Pentagon spends on film production. We don't know that the Pentagon has a big filming industry, um, but Tom Cruise's new hit movie had a little bit of influence from that, as does every other war movie to make America look like we're fighting the next foe that may come up, and that we're all heroes doing, taking care of a pretend country, be it China or Iran that he was attacking, um, but to get us ready for the next war. Um, and this big industrial military complex that Ike Eisenhower, the only general to be our president, in his departing speech warned us against, um, has come to fruition, which enabled people like the immensely unethical Dick Cheney to ally with Benny Netanyahu. I call him. I forget his name because I call him Death and Yahoo. um, but but
Name.
the um, but the combination of those two unethical bastards really steered our Congress and and manipulated them like clay to believe that there were weapons of mass destruction, and then that the destruction of Saddam Hussein was absolutely necessary to ensure the peace of the world, because he had a nuclear weapon that he was building, just like they're saying Iran has a nuclear weapon that they're building.
Yeah, you
Uh,
can't see it now.
oh, it's
We
yeah,
wish people would pay attention, but no, they just keep spewing out what they're fed. But there
no,
are a
no,
lot of us.
we're going down a highway that could genuinely lead to World War III, and Netanyahu is the cause, and we're 1,000% complicit because we're just clay in his hands,
Mhm.
and he plays chess to our checkers. He's smart enough to know that first he has to commit that every politician has to instantly understand that because we don't have term limits, you have to take APAC money to stay in business. And in order to get 100% score for APAC, not everybody, but most people, I mean, there's ethical uh, uh, congressmen such as Darrell Issa, a Republican that gets 100% score from APAC, who still maintains his ethics, right?
Mhm.
But generally speaking, people fight for that 100% score. He may do so out of love for Judaism and out of love for the country of Israel. But there are those that do it just for the money,
Yeah, yeah.
because money does speak in our Congress. He's a congressman who loves his district. He's a congressman that loves the United States. So is Bernie Sanders. Those are two Jewish people in our legislature that are molded in ethics and act as they're molded in ethics. Um, I'm not sure Chuck Schumer really is. I have a personal lack of interaction with him when I begged him for help when I was in Gaza in ensuring our safety, to which I got no answer. The day after he berated Netanyahu on the legislative floor, I told him that the World Central Kitchen got bombed, and I'm in Gaza now with 12 other Americans, and we received the same deconfliction protection that Israel gave the World Central Kitchen, and we have a departure through the Gaza border where the World Central Kitchen vans entered. Um, and we are about to leave, and I would really not like a missile through the roof of my van. Could you please help me save the lives of my colleagues? Um, and to which he didn't respond after 4 telephone calls,
Mhm.
and they were calls that his secretary answered.
Mhm.
Right, I had a didactic with his secretary. We actually spoke meaningfully, and she promised me that he or his representative would get back to us. And so the longest half-hour ride of my life was that, because I thought that the most ranking Jewish member of Congress didn't give a shit, uh, and and that was because he's probably paid not to give a shit. Um, and in spite of what he says.
They literally turn away. I was sharing earlier, like I said, I grew up in Los Angeles, never ever saying Palestinian because I didn't realize how I was fed in the media. I was like, I don't want to be, they were how they're portrayed, angry, violent. And I wanted to be on TV, I was like, I always said I'm white. And only about, 15 years ago, I realized what a blessing, what a place I'm from. And I started saying, but I see why they're angry. I see why they always seem so. We're all like that now. It's like we are constantly being ignored. And
Well, because you're a terrorist. I mean, look at who was my favorite comedian, the ventriloquist who has a puppet who's a Muslim terrorist.
yeah,
Uh, at no point, I mean, he has a pepper on a stick. he has a cartoon character, and the only person who looks like a real human is an Arab terrorist,
Hmm.
uh, Ahmed.
We are fetish, so deep rooted.
Right, um, and Jeff Dunham gets away with it, and everybody in his audience gets away with it. And prior to October 7th, he literally was one of my favorite comedians, and I wouldn't watch a YouTube channel with him now because
Hmm.
because he was part of my indoctrination. Uh,
Hmm.
and I get it; he did it as a joke. I would like to think he did. Um, but at the same point, he can do so only with the permission in a Me Too society, because as much as we don't want to offend women, as much as we don't want to offend people of color, as much as we don't want to offend Jews, as much as we don't want to offend Sikhs, or anybody else who's or Asians, as much as we don't want to offend, it is okay during those same times to associate someone who's Muslim with terrorism, which is insane, that level of insensitivity.
So you
Uh,
went to Gaza with this thinking,
that
and
you're a
really
terrorist.
am
Oh, but
waiting.
you're a terrorist. I'm
Really?
going to be. Oh yeah, I'm going to Gaza, and and maybe I'll be lucky enough to run across some Israeli soldiers to protect me from the terrorists.
Wow.
Right? Oh, yeah. So in reality, shortly after I got there, I realized that, yeah, it's the Israeli soldiers I'm worried about, because the amount of love that I got uh, from uh, from Palestinians was immeasurable, palpably, visibly, audibly more than the rest of my team, which, with the exception of Feroz Sidwa, was 100% Palestinian or Jordanian or Middle Eastern in descent, and Feroz looks more Palestinian than any of them. And he's from Pakistani Indian heritage, and um, but he looks like he has the face of a map of Palestine on his face. Um, but but I was the only white man in that group, and yet I received more love and affection than the rest of the group combined. Uh, from strangers, from patients, from everything. And it wasn't because of my affect, it's because Palestinians are people of love. And I would speak to them, use that affection as a segue, and say, well, how do you feel about Jews? We love Jews. I was raised by a Jew. When my parents would go to work, my neighbor who was a Jew would babysit me, right? My mother didn't make milk, and I breastfed off of a pregnant Jew down the street. Um, we don't dislike, those are typical stories. They have zero hatred for Judaism. Now, ask them what they feel about the Israeli government. It's a different story. They're sophisticated enough to know the difference, that this is not a battle between Jews and Arabs. This is not the Crusades where two religions fought each other for a mythical rights to a town. Um, the, these are people who understand that ever since the late 1940s, this is nothing but a stinking land grab.
Yeah.
It's only one group of people stealing the land of another, and they don't really give a hoot if they die in that process or not. I'll give you 5 hours to leave. If you're not leaving, I'm coming in with a bulldozer. Um, that is not saying that I'm coming in because I'm a Jew and I hate you because you're an Arab. They're coming in because I want your land. Period.
Hmm.
That's all this is, and every Palestinian recognizes that.
Hmm.
Uh, Now, if they fight for their freedom, they're called terrorists,
Hmm.
and the oppressive Israeli soldiers are now freedom fighters defending the rights of Israel. Well, how do you defend a country when you're nothing but on the offense? When
Hmm.
you're nothing but prison guards to an open air prison, um, and the inmates revolt. I mean, you have kids that 18 years ago, I think that's when the last election was. I think was it 2006 or so. Um, um, that have never been part of an election, that have never been allowed to leave their country, uh, that had certifiable clinical depression as children because of their life experiences. And now they're young adults, and we're surprised that they're revolting. We're surprised that if there's a break in the wall that they're going to escape. Hell, my hamster escaped when there was a hole in the cage. You know, uh, why would you expect a kid that's raised under the veil of terrorism?
So did you ever say like the words, they have their freedom, they were released in 2006, and they've been, all that stuff that people are still constantly saying, and they don't understand that they are under occupation and it's an apartheid
But
state?
most people don't understand the history. I didn't understand the history.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the history. I landed in Cairo at 10 o'clock at night. I did standby flighting for 36 hours to get to almost 48 hours to get to genuinely 48 hours. By the time I got to Cairo, it was about the 46th hour of standby flight transport. Um, and and I saw my packaging getting my four huge duffel bags getting loaded onto the plane after they closed the doors of the plane. So I was like, yeah, I felt secure that my equipment was with me. Uh, and only after that arduous trip to get to Cairo, 20 minutes, a half hour before the vans left to go through the Sinai, that I hear this kid talking, this young doctor talking, and I was impressed by hearing him talk to somebody else about uh, the history of the area. I figured, oh man, I got to sit next to this dude or in earshot of him on this trip because I have no idea how long it takes to drive through the Sinai, but I know on my phone it's about 2 inches on the map. So I'm thinking it's going to take a long time. And I mean, I know how much the distance is, but I don't know about checkpoints. I know nothing about driving through Bedouin territory or through Egypt, or I didn't know that if you go over the Suez Canal or under it. I don't know anything about anything on this trip. I just knew I had to take it in order to get to my goal, and my goal was 100% apolitical. My goal was just to take care of children because that's what I like to do with my mission work, and I knew only two things: that 50% of the patients, 50% of the population were children, which meant that about 90% of the patients will be children. Um, I mean, I can take a bomb blast a lot better than a child can. And by the way, that came to fruition. 90% of our patients were children. We'll talk about that in a bit, I guess. But so I had that plus the knowledge um, that my country was involved um, in my early reading while I was on standby flying, because my opinions were being started to evolve with that reading. Um, that my country may be, just maybe, illicitly involved in the bombing of these children. But I just knew that early on that that this justifiable war against you Palestinian terrorists and would involve children. So I needed to go there for that reason. Uh, wasn't too long after I got there that I realized it was a genocide. I mean, within hours.
Yeah. So, I know it must have been crazy, and you're dealing with, little resources, little people coming in. Um, how did, what happened? Like, what were you seeing and what were you thrown into?
Uh, well, mass casualty events, the three words that any doctor there would define um, the situation would be mass casualty events only interrupted by non-mass casualty events, all of which surpass what we would typically see in the emergency room of any trauma center at any time in any major city. Um, I trained at the busiest trauma center in the country, at least it was when I trained for my hand surgery fellowship in the University of Miami. And I picked that location because it was the busiest trauma center in the United States at that time. My choices were between Detroit receiving, Cook County, and Miami. And Miami was the busiest. It was also the sunniest for my family. Um, but we picked Miami because it literally was the busiest trauma center, and I would gain experience that the largely elective practice that I had at Thomas Jefferson University, in Philly, where I did my medical school and residency. That did not afford me exposure to trauma, so I picked Miami for that reason. And the worst night in Miami didn't touch the quietest moments at the European Gaza hospital. Um, and I think Miami at that time had 36 ER receiving bays for ambulances. I think that's the correct number, um, if I recall right. And so it's a hugely busy trauma center with lots of gang violence. And It still wasn't as busy as the European Gaza Hospital, which is only a 200 and some bed hospital, low 200s. It's smaller than the smallest hospital that I work at, the community hospital, um, and uh, its ER receiving bay is about the size of my walk-in closet. It's enough to hold 4 gurneys tightly. Um, which is why when kids would come in, we would immediately get the gurneys out of the way to make more room and treat them on the floor. Um, and um, um, at any one time, there was 15 or 20 kids coming in with every bombing as a mass casualty event. And then if there were quiet moments, there was always 2 or 3 or 5 coming in, right? So the quiet moments had a level of trauma that far surpassed every community hospital and um, definitively surpassed most trauma centers. Most level one, the highest rating of trauma centers, um, they would be overwhelmed. The highest rated trauma centers would be overwhelmed with one of the mass casualty events that European Gaza hospital had. Um,
What are the odds of you saving them with numbers coming in like that? And I
Low,
not
exceedingly low. A third of the patients were dead on arrival, put on the ambulance alive. Most of the victims never made it into the ambulance because of the impressive violence of a 2,000-pound bomb. Um, and um, the the amount of violence of the concussion, even if you weren't hit by shrapnel, is impressive. And then, of course, there's the collapse of a building. If you're uh, under the rebar and concrete, your body will never be found. Um, and I firmly believe there's 300,000 dead people, dead Palestinians under the rubble. Uh, I mean, if you look at the photograph of the earthquakes that have happened in the last couple of years, all the way back to Haiti, and then if you look at the population of discovered dead uh, as the weeks ensue from the removal of the rubble, then it's an exponential rise, not linear rise, an exponential rise in the death count, only with the removal of the rubble. And that's at every earthquake that levels buildings. Uh, Look at an aerial photograph of Gaza, of Rafah, or Gaza City, or the metropolis above Gaza City that's being leveled right now as we speak, or southern Lebanon, and you'll see nothing but piles of cinders and rebar. Um, where did those people go that were living in those buildings?
yeah.
You know, when Israel operates an AI program called "Where's Your Daddy," um, and it follows a kid home, hoping that that kid has a young father who may or may not be a Hamas combatant, and that whole building is blown up, destroying the neighbors, destroying the extended family, of which has grandparents and great grandparents within it. Generations in one family are destroyed by that bomb, as are the neighbors, as are everybody on that block, um, where the whole collection of buildings collapse just to kill the potential father of that children being a combatant. Um, the justification in that non-human supervised AI program is insanity and inhumanity defined.
So how long
Um,
did it take you to realize this isn't about Hamas?
oh, less than 24 hours. The very first night we were there, I got educated what Ramadan was. I mean, I knew what it was. I never experienced it. I never saw in my life such a wonderful and beautiful collection of people celebrating God uh, as much as I did within 24 hours. Because it was done in a building that was in rubble. It was done while bombs were exploding around them. It was done with fasting going on, which is a concept I can't understand because I'm sneaking bites of a protein bar while everybody's fasting. I didn't want to be seen eating, um, and and I have to graze all day long to stay functional. And that the concept of getting up at 4 in the morning to eat before sunrise and fasting all day is like that alone is a sacrifice that I would have difficulty doing. But to see a collective self-sacrifice in the name of God is it was moving um, in the setting that I saw it in, especially right. It garnishes respect because I see where the dignity and the strength comes from. Um,
Well, I'm amazed because even I wondered, I do know, but I was like, do they fast under these conditions?
oh my gosh, it was impressive, especially when the food greeting them was suboptimal, right? So, so the first night, I always heard the lawnmower in the distance, not putting together it was a Predator drone overhead. Um, but uh, the first night when everybody starts to disappear for iftar, um, of course, the meal breaking the fast, which I learned what it was that night. The sense of loyalty for that um, was
Wow.
impressive, but accompanying that was a greater noise of drones, a different character of drones. um, the difference between a weed eater down the block and somebody's lawnmower in your lawn, where both sounds are there. One is louder and more distinct, and you can tell it's a different machine. Um, and the pitch, the volume, the cavitation, the other nuances that make a propeller-driven object different than another. You can tell that something's different, and that something that was different was, in retrospect, it took 2 or 3 days to really put it together. Was that um, they're looking for crowds of people, the collection of women and children, which were distinctly separated from men during the fast and during iftar, not during the fast, I suspect, but certainly during the meal and the prayer. Um, that this collection of women and children, which you could visualize, um, they were the targets. And they were so distinctly separated from the men
Yes.
that the deliberate bombing of the collection of women and children can only be interpreted one way. Um, and that's their intended mass murder. And the effectiveness of a 500 or 2,000 pound bomb is um, infinitely more effective if that bomb is dropped on a collective of people as opposed to a
To a
small group. And so in essence, the deliberate targeting of a mass group of women and children, which clearly show up on a video camera as a mass group of women and children, and to deliberately drop a bomb, a non-selective bomb, that will leave a crater 20 feet deep and 100 feet wide, and remove every piece of concrete and rebar and tree in the area. Um, and then obviously vaporize any beating heart that was in that same area. To deliberately do that is not seeking out Hamas. And so very early on, I realized that it was total bullshit that Israel is going after Hamas. Um,
And
that
so
they said just using that as an excuse to eliminate the population.
because you're
And
starting to see kids come in targeted specifically.
90% of our patients were children. The other 10% were elderly men and women. There was never, ever, once anybody definitively could remotely be considered a combatant. Never once. 100% children, um, women, or elderly women and men. 100%. There was
And
one.
actually sniped, actually
Well, there
targeted.
were three. There was three classes of four, maybe three plus classes of wounds. There was the most popular was the victim of a bombing. It's either the direct shrapnel wounds or the effects of the flying concrete and rebar or the crushing from the concrete and rebar. The bombings claimed most victims. Um, then there was a mysterious small little tungsten cylinder that in the shape of a pencil eraser, a number two pencil eraser that was half the size, maybe a third of the size of that, but tungsten, a very dense metal that would fly at impressively high rates of speed, or velocity is the right term, and and destructive nature of any projectile, bullet, or shrapnel piece is directly proportional to its mass, but it's exceptionally, exponentially proportional to its velocity. So if you double the velocity of a flying object, the kinetic energy is increased 4 times, much more so than if you just double the mass, which just doubles the kinetic energy. So small objects flying fast do more damage than a big object flying slow. Um, and and these impressively small objects would enter a baby's chest through a hole that we couldn't find sometimes, but we could see on CAT scan the trajectory of the wound, um, and the soft tissue damage, and see the exit wound with our eyes, which are always bigger than the entrance wound. Um, or we'd see two little pinholes on both sides of a tibia, a shin bone, with the bone vaporized on the inside, with so many fragments, one would think that he laid his leg on a railroad track. Um, and the skin didn't get hurt, but the bones got dusted like grains of sand on the inside. That's how much kinetic energy that small little fragment imparted. But while leaving minuscule entrance and exit holes. So that was a definitive and illegal um, um, weapon of mass destruction. And Israel was found guilty of using tungsten. I think the word was fledgets before, little dart-shaped ones that the ICJ had ruled against them for using decades ago, and with their promise that they would reinvent it, and which they did. And we're not the only ones who saw that. There's online postings of those same little tungsten cylinders. Um, and then the third type of injury were high velocity bullet injuries. Um, and they have a classic presentation. Every trauma surgeon has seen them: a very small entrance wound, a very gaping, huge exit wound. It's a military round. Again, impressively high velocity. So the amount of energy that the body that it hits, absorbs is huge. And when you look at Dr. Sidwa's wonderfully and scholarly written New York Times article that he very impressively got published by a newspaper with marginal ethics on this issue. They tried to redeem themselves and may have redeemed themselves by publishing his full page article and then defending it against Zionists within the next week, vehemently defending the tenacity and accuracy of the article. Kudos to them for that. But the when you look at that article and break it down, 83% of doctors who treated kids, 83% said they saw a child that was shot in the head or chest. So early on, I thought I was the only one. And Thoreau said at the beginning he thought he was the only one. And I think he said he saw about a dozen. I saw less, but I think I'm the only one who said they saw kids who were shot in both the chest and head. And I've said on, for example, on CBS Sunday Morning, no child gets shot twice by mistake by the world's best snipers. Self-proclaimed most ethical army in the world, self-proclaimed most accurate snipers in the world.
You've debunked already so many of these lies that were being fed while
Oh
you're
yeah, it's all part of a huge lie. And no kid gets shot twice by mistake, period. And to support that, one of those children I saw had a male caregiver. And again, I've said before, and it's true, I honestly didn't ask him what relation he was. I presumed it was his father. And I still could be wrong on that, but it was the person who brought him in. And I have a photograph of this gentleman covering his face, sprawled out on the floor of the emergency room with blood on his chest and blood on the shower curtain that's designed to separate the room into floors for privacy. There is he's covering his face with the curtain, his crying with the curtain. And I actually took a photo of him doing so. And his story to me was that he felt the child whose hand he was holding get pulled out of his hand, and he thought he fell into a hole or something or tripped, and then found him yards away. His words were meters away. And when he looked down at him at the ground, he saw him get hit in the head, and then ran to him, picked him up, and then looked over to where the sound came from and saw an Israeli soldier who then retreated. And then he brought the kid to the hospital, and then the kid, when he had his head dressed, wrapped up in a dirty cloth. But when I rolled him over, my hand fell into the back of his chest cavity. There was no spine. There was no spinal cord, of course. There were no lungs, and there was no heart. There was just a hole in the front of his chest. And it completely eviscerated his chest cavity with the force of the bullet. And then when I rolled him back, the dressing fell off of his head and his brains fell into my hand. Because the second bullet entered into his temple and exited through his neck. And
I can't imagine being a father, like, and these parents. This is what we're so tired of seeing, every day.
yeah, and it is, and as I said before, I've seen ugly things in my life, but I've seen ugly things from acts of nature. I've seen ugly things from uncaring people as well. Um, but not on a mass scale where the target was deliberately children. I've seen people not care for other people because of money reasons, the overwhelming biggest reason in our world. Um, but I've never seen anybody deliberately, intentionally want to dehumanize a population by killing the next generation of humans. Um,
The ethnic cleansing.
by definition, the best way to dehumanize a population is not to destroy their churches or their mosques. It's not to destroy their cultural heritage sites. It's not to destroy their schools. It's not to destroy their food supply and their sewage treatment plants and water pumps, and their houses and their infrastructure. The best way to dehumanize a population is to kill their children. And um, because if you think about what would be the worst thing in your life, would be the loss of my children.
Mm-hmm.
To live through the loss of my children. And I
And
don't know that I don't know the loving parent who wouldn't echo those same comments.
yeah,
Right?
and
I would
did
die
you
a
ever
thousand
think,
deaths before my oh my gosh, my son has testicular cancer. And I pray every night that for God to take me before he takes a day out of his life. And I couldn't imagine having my son shot out of my hands. Just an unfathomable.
this is what is hard is that it's like you said, this is being live streamed.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna force people. I know they're scrolling past it. I know, yeah, we'll pray for your son too. Um, it, we're watching this. I'm seeing things every day. I'm sure you're glued to your phone too. It's like we just witnessed the most. Hollywood doesn't make this gore, you know. And
Hollywood doesn't. Holly's complicit in this gore. There's a movie that's coming out now called October Hate, and play on the word October 8th. And it has plenty of Hollywood people in it that are advancing the Zionistic message. Hollywood is owned by Zionists.
I
Our politicians are owned by Zionists. Our mass media is owned by
please explain
Zionists.
Zionist because it's really shocking to me that some people still don't even, I'm still having to explain and they don't understand.
It's simple. It's simple. Um, in the mid 1890s, a gentleman came up with the idea of Zionism, and it was intended to have a safe place for Jews to live in the world, because for sure, Jews were oppressed against. Right? They were even in colonial America, Jews were oppressed. Um, and during the Revolutionary War, Jews were oppressed in the United States. There are the clear oppression against Jews and against other cultures that entered into other lands. We used to look down on Irish and Catholics and anybody who was a threat, Italians. Um, my grandfather was called a wop in front of me when he took me to the general store to buy me candy when I was a kid. Um, and a WAP stands for without papers, coming in without papers. And years after he was an established member of our community, he was called a WAP in front of me. Um, and now nobody would denigrate an Italian, right? If you ask him, what do you think about Italians? Great food is your answer, right? Or lovely neighbor. Uh, because they're not people of color. Irish got assimilated in our society. Um, um, Blacks are darker. That's going to take them still another 100 years. You terrorists, there may not be any hope for you as long as the Zionists are available. But anyway, because of the Jewish oppression, um, a political movement, not a religious movement, but a politico social movement called Zionism evolved. and its purpose was to create a safe haven for Jews. Um, so as World War I and World War II progressed, that became more advanced, and the Zionistic movement in the United States uh, were talking to political groups, including the Nazis, including Churchill, and including the American presidency, about forming a safe haven for Jews after the war. They should have given them East Germany, what would have been the better place, right? Because they were responsible for all this.
Yeah.
They should have given them ownership of East Germany and called it Israel. But instead, the English, who were screwing up the Middle East, who were part of this process, figured, well, let's see how I can screw it up even more. Let's give them land that already belongs to somebody else, and this land is called Palestine. Um, and um, and so as the Jews moved in there, the first effort was to displace the people who already lived there. And, and places like Gaza City were a collection of Christians and Jews and agnostics and Muslims, um, and they'd all lived in harmony. But when when Israel was declared by England and the United States to be a real thing, um, the people who live there are going, yeah, but what about us? It's kind of like my family's lived here for a couple thousand years, um, and that didn't matter. So in 1948, they were all kicked out, and they were given choices. You can go into Lebanon, you can go into Jordan, you can go into Egypt. Um, uh, or you can stay in Israel and be oppressed for the rest of your life. And they did. And that created a large diaspora where now there's as many Palestinians that live outside of the United States as live into it. Many went to Central America. Indeed, the intelligentsia and the ruling people in Honduras, where I go, are of guess what nationality, and guess when they got there? They're Palestinians that got there in 1948. They were largely kicked out of the country. And those that couldn't leave, the poor, went into other countries that accepted them. Well, Egypt wouldn't accept them. So, so they collected at the Egyptian border on this little tract of land that's about 5 by 20 miles in size. It's about the size of Philadelphia. Um, and or the size of Nagasaki, Japan, a city which I think we should talk about in a minute, um, because it's actually smaller than Nagasaki, um, and more densely populated than Nagasaki at this time, or was on October 7th and October 6th. Um, and um, the this tract of land existed only because Egypt wouldn't accept that. And so that's where Gaza came into being. And then uh, the the governments of the United States, so with some European representation, but mostly English representation, formed the West Bank and Gaza. The West Bank was divided amongst areas that would be under exclusive Palestinian control and areas that would have some Israeli governance. And that over the years has evolved into 100% under Israeli governance, very little under continuing Palestinian control. Uh, and then there was negotiations through the years, which were largely designed to screw over the Palestinians, including the Camp David Accords, the Oslo Accords that preceded them, and any other thing that you may not know about, other than the fact that you heard a line of bullshit that Jimmy Carter's Camp David Accords were wonderful for the Palestinians, but all they did was cement their screwing over,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I've learned all this just this year too. It's
Right.
undoing everything we've been told.
Yeah. All
So
it
did
did
you
was
know, were you
guarantee.
aware
Yeah.
about Zionism before? Like, or is that a learning too? The
No, it's
difference?
a learning. No, it's a learning thing because Zionism to me was how a Jew protected himself, right? And and now what it's translated into is to justify a process called, well, there's two processes going on. There's the Gaza, and then there's West Bank. Let's talk about the West Bank first. There's a process called colonial settlerism. Okay, Americans can understand that easy. We discovered gold in the central western United States, where we gave the Sioux Indians a homeland. But now we want your gold, and my name's Colonel Custer, and I'm coming to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We want the land back that by treaty we gave to you, and so I'm going to kill you to get your land.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to put you all on a reservation of worthless land, and that's exactly what Gaza is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to continue to take your reservation land.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you rights. I'm going to put oil pipelines through it and not give you a choice in the matter. I'm going to put that oil pipeline right through your burial sites.
I never thought of
So
that word, reservation. That's a great description.
it's the perfect analogy. And I'm going to deny you health care. I'm going to deny you education. I'm going to deny you water supply. I'm going to deny you everything. And I'm going to make you the poorest population on the Western Hemisphere. Um, and I'm going to screw you every possible way I can. I'm going to expect you to thank me for everything I do for you. Um, and and that's what we've done to the American indigenous population. But that's exactly what's happening to the Gaza. They're put on a reservation, but this time they have dual layer concrete walls with razor wire on top. They have sound detectors underground that hear the vibration of the ground if anybody's crossing it. There's always an overlapping predator drone flying overhead. Um, and they're not allowed to go more than 100 yards out into the ocean, or a gunship will shoot upon you. So you can't fish. Your imports are limited, your exports are limited. You have no control of your electromagnetic space, which is your TV, your telephone, and your internet. That's all controlled by Israel. If you want to use your phone, you have to use your Israeli SIM card. You have no freedom. You can't leave a space that is smaller than the county I live in, but has 60 times the population. Um, and and then I'm going to mow the lawn every now and then is their term for coming in. I'm just going to kill a bunch of you to keep you knowing who the prison guards are. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to selectively kill you, and I don't care if you're women and children holding white flags in the March of the White Flags. I'm still going to kill you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And and I'm going to kill you on a periodic basis to make sure you know who the guards are. And you don't have to give me a reason. And I'm going to blame it on you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened on October 7th. Because if you think that October 7th didn't happen intentionally on the side of the Jewish IDF to give them an excuse to mow the lawn again, how could that security wall be breached
Mm-hmm.
accidentally?
Mm-hmm.
That was orchestrated by Netanyahu. In fact, there's no mystery that he is the one who's given Hamas all their weaponry under the pretense of keeping the Palestinian Authority, which is the ruling group in the West Bank, um, and then the ruling group at Hamas in Gaza was Hamas. And of course, he wanted to separate the two because one wanted a one-state solution and one wanted a two-state solution. And he didn't want any solution because when you look at the solutions for Palestinians, there's only two. There's only four, I should say. There's a one-state solution. That's never going to happen. Um, there's a two-state solution, and that was never going to happen. I'm just moving to get the sun out of the camera as it sets. Um, that leaves two other options: an apartheid state, which the world was growing tired of. And if you don't want to do that, there's only one other option, and that's to exterminate the rodents, and that's called a genocide. Um, and so they've already shown for decades that a one and two state solution are not acceptable options. And the apartheid state was working, but the world didn't like it. And the only way to get the land was not to have an apartheid state, but was to kill the Gazans or displace them. And that's exactly what's happening. As I said, Netanyahu's playing chess against the intelligent government that we don't have, which still has checker pieces in their hands. Um, he first cleared out southern Gaza. Rafah was bombed when I was there. Now there's nothing left in southern Gaza. He displaced everybody to the north, and now they're telling everybody to move to the south as Gaza City doesn't exist anymore. None of the coastal towns exist anymore, um, and the metropolis above Gaza City is now leveled. Now everybody's being told to displace to the south, where there is nothing but previous 10 cities and collections of rubble. Um, and if you look at an aerial view of the Rafah crossing now, it's being prepared by Israel to accept the efflux of remaining Palestinians into Egypt. And you'll see, in my belief, the Sinai Peninsula become the new Gaza Strip, the new concentration camp. Um, and um, and that's going to happen eventually. Gaza will be taken over by Israel with America's blessing um, and support, which makes us 110% complicit yeah, in this war crime. And I firmly believe, for which I firmly believe, Americans should be held in trial for those war crimes, like Blinken and Biden. Um, and I would testify against them for what I've seen in the ICJ or any other court that the United States would recognize. Of course, we don't recognize either of those courts on purpose, right?
Anymore. Yeah.
Yeah,
More.
that's how we insulate ourselves from global scrutiny. Is we give the middle finger for those court systems. And so we're going to see Gazans collect in the Sinai Peninsula, and I'm sure Egypt is on the receiving end of billions of dollars to accept that. Um,
Um, Lastly, though, I want to hear more about your experience with the Palestinians, the people, and because this is also what people don't know here. Like I've been there. I grew up here, but then I went to Egypt first when I was a teenager and just changed everything. And I ended up staying.
sure.
I lived there for
Okay.
3 years.
So the Palestinians are nothing but a collection of amazingly wonderful, beautiful, loving people. Um, I never saw a single Palestinian that was mean, not giving. In the face of starvation, they would offer me their food. Um, in the state, in the face of immense thirst, they would wash their hands and pray before they would drink the bottle. Um, they are the cleanest in the face of devastating filth, the cleanest, most loving, most spiritual, giving, non-mean people that I've ever met in my life. In terms of impoverished populations, they held on to more dignity than any population I've ever seen.
Mhm.
Uh, I've never seen a group of people raped of every material uh, and emotional uh, uh, foundation that they could have had and still maintain so much dignity. And that's why Palestine will always exist, even though it may be relocated to another location. You're not going to kill Palestine.
Mhm.
Um, and neither will occupying forces ever appreciate the beauty of that land. And I mean, when you look at Netanyahu, all of his ancestors are buried in Poland.
Mhm.
When you look at Ben Gurion, all of his ancestors are buried in Poland. Um, uh, Gallant, all of his ancestors are buried, I believe, in the Ukraine. They have no heritage there,
Mhm.
right? But everyone that they're killing, they're for millennia, their generations are living under and buried under the rubble
Mhm.
that the bulldozers are now trailing them.
Mhm.
They're living and going to build homes on top of the bones of the children they crushed with their bombs. Um, and they're going to do so claiming it part of greater Israel that was always intended to be when it never was.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. I always think that's like a perfect place to stop. It was beautiful. I love that you learned that, and like Palestinians, you know that that's what they want to be heard. That's all they want is their story out.
That's the truth. They're just a normal, loving people, um, it just supports the fact that it's just a land grab, you
Are
know,
you close to
and
many
that
people keeping in touch there?
I'm in touch with medical students there because we're trying to get them placed in the United States, and it's difficult because uh, half of them are males, and males are not allowed out of the country. We've got five female medical students. I believe it's five now placed in the United States, and that are continuing with their medical school, and um, who knows what's going to happen with the H-1 visas, and I'm not sure what you call it, an educational visa, but who knows what's going to happen with those with the Trump administration. Um, but hopefully they'll be allowed to stay. I don't think it's going to affect educational visas at all. I think it's aimed at. I hate the term illegal aliens. It's really aimed at undocumented workers.
Did you lose friends that you made there?
No, I lost friends here.
Oh yeah, well, we all lost friends here.
Yeah,
I know that one. But
no,
I
I
mean,
lost friends
like,
here. I
it's
made friends there.
yeah, but I mean, like, good. They're safe, hopefully.
Oh no, I've lost friends. Yeah.
Love the
We
ones.
we have we have memorial texts almost on a weekly basis now about someone who was killed.
Yeah, because you just learn to love them, and I'm sure they've taken you in as one of them, and but sadly, it's just I feel like we're all watching, hoping every day everyone's okay.
Yeah. We've lost contact with about 80% of the medical students that we're trying to get to the United States. We can't find contact with them. I made contact with a patient of mine who's now in Egypt, who exemplifies um, at least 30 or 50 war crimes just himself. Um, and he's an orthopedic nurse who was shot in the operating room. And I maintain communication with him, trying to get him to the United States, um, to get him recertified as a OR tech in the United States, and then hopefully get a job, and then hopefully get his family over here. So, but right now he's trying to save his leg, which is still infected from the gunshot wound.
Okay. Well, I hope to stay posted. Will you post about that?
Yes,
Posted. But all right, I will stop this and thank you so much for all you do and thank you
my
for your
pleasure.
and I'm glad to have you in this fight with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I am still very moved. He has been super kind and I will call him a friend. And I'm just grateful when I meet amazing human beings, humanitarians. And I just hope you enjoyed it. I will be sharing his Instagram handle and continuing to bring you people who are sharing the truth. I talked to my Palestinian friend, and they just get very happy when I tell them about these meetings and these stories because they don't want us to stop talking about Palestine. And we will refuse to stop talking about Palestine. So please like, comment, and keep sharing. And don't stop talking about Palestine.